Right now, if you flip on the news, you're going to see the same basic story on every channel. Special forces dropping into Caracas, Venezuela, a Latin American president dragged out of power, and commentators patting themselves on the back for a flawless military mission. The news wants you glued to helicopters and nighttime footage, and Congress wants you questioning whether President Trump is legal or moral, so you don't ask the real question: what's really behind all of this? This wasn't some sudden moral awakening about democracy or human rights. It's not mainly about drugs either. This is about money, resources, and a system that's been under pressure that needed to snap. Now, for more than 2 decades, Washington, D.C. tried to strangle Venezuela with sanctions, freezing their assets, propping up opposition figures, and assuming they could keep those oil reserves under control forever. Well, they were losing them to China. What we're really seeing now is the moment where that strategy ran out of runway. The raid is just the dramatic tip of the spear. The real story is the financial stress building up underneath the global system, and why this move in Venezuela had to happen now and not 10 years from now. President Trump is making serious power moves to position the United States to remain the world superpower. To do so, he needs a strong world reserve currency dollar. He needs weaker enemies, metals, precious metals like steel and nickel and iron, and lots of access to oil and energy. What he's done in Venezuela is a complete game changer. Now, I'm going to react to another channel's video. I respect what they said. The second half of this is better than the first, so I'll make sure to put timestamps. But you need to watch this in sequence so you fully understand what President Trump just did for America. And he did it through private investment and not taxpayer money, which is what every president has done in the past. Check this out.
Venezuela. President Trump comes out and says that the U.S., Rob, do you have the story? I think you got a video on this one as well, if I'm not mistaken. President Trump comes out and says Venezuela to give up 50 million barrels of oil to the U.S. I am pleased to announce that the interim authorities in Venezuela will be turning over around 30 to 50 million barrels of quality sanctioned oil to the U.S. This oil will be sold at its market price, and the money will be controlled by me as the president of the United States of America to ensure it is used to benefit the people of Venezuela and the U.S. I asked Energy Secretary Chris Wright to execute this plan immediately. It will be taken by storage ships and brought directly to unloading docks in the U.S. Thank you for your attention to this matter. He is such an interesting guy. Thank you for your attention to this matter. We just got 50 million barrels, folks. And Trump in a social media post, it will take the U.S. crude oil, crude futures fell 1.3% to 56.39 per barrel on the heels of Trump's announcement. The announcement came 3 days after U.S. captured Maduro. Wall Street Journal reported Tuesday that Trump plans to meet with representatives from the major oil companies, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, ExxonMobil, along with other domestic producers at the White House on Friday to discuss making significant investments in Venezuela oil sector. Now watch this.
Okay, really quickly. Listen to what President Trump has been saying over and over again. The real power of Russia being able to take out Ukraine has been high oil prices. This is what's giving them the money to fight the war. On top of that, they moved closer in their relationship with China. China is starving for oil. So President Trump is taking one of the main assets off of the game board, which is access to Venezuelan oil.
Here's what's interesting. While this is going on, China's like, wait a minute, that's ours. That's not yours. Here's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from China giving their message. Go ahead, Rob.
The United States has brazenly resorted to the use of force against Venezuela and demanded that America First be applied when Venezuela disposes of its own oil resources. This is a typical act of bullying, a serious violation of international law, and a
All right, that goes on for several minutes, but I respect your time. Basically, America is bad. That was our oil. We had a contract, but what China had done was through their Belt and Road Initiative is they had basically conquered Venezuela, and they were going to drive them into bankruptcy or default. What would they then do? They would take over all of those oil fields, And who did those oil fields used to belong to? America. But no American president had the balls to go and take it back until President Trump. Let's keep going on this.
Sure. Tom, how do you feel about this?
Oh, first of all, who is she from? She was from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I thought the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was something that involved Eric Swalwell. So as well, pass on that. Second, here's something fun facts. Fun facts. Ready for numbers screen? The total output right now during the naval semi-blockade from Venezuela is 600,000 barrels a day. That is the output right now. The nominal output when they were under this over the last couple of years, when they've got electricity shortages and all the things that the problems they had in their economy, was 800,000 to 900,000 barrels a day. The logical limit based on every pipeline and the port, there's a port Jose and there's a second port, there's two main ports, is only 1.7 million barrels per day. That means if everything was working perfectly right in Venezuela and the ports were operating at maximum efficiency and all the pipelines that go into this huge center geography that's in Venezuela and this big valley where all the oil is, we're all working maximum to 1.7. So what Trump is basically saying right now, somewhere between 600 and 900 barrels a day for the next 90 days, if he wanted to, he could step on the air hose to China and Iran and only send the oil here. Now, there's also something very interesting. Venezuelan oil, because you've heard people talk about light sweet crude and West WTI, West Texas Intermediate, which is the Permian Basin. There's all different types of oil. And just like there's different types of gasoline and aviation gas. Well, guess what? Venezuelan crude is known as heavy crude. And heavy crude needs special refineries who can handle the heavy crude. And would you like to know where the most heavy crude refineries are? And the answer is the United States Gulf Coast, particularly
Gulf of America.
The Gulf of America. Houston Galveston has the most facility in the world to refine Venezuelan oil. Almost like the U.S. oil makers knew or were buying from Venezuela all along and had the facilities. So when they got that type of crude, they could turn it into the big four: automobile gas, heating oil, aviation fuel, and then all the derivative products that come out of a barrel of oil, the plastics and plastic-like items. Right. So what's going on right now, there's only one U.S. Oil company operating at speed, and that's Chevron, and they're getting about 250 million barrels a day. So guess what? So if he's going to have a meeting in the White House, really, he's really asking Chevron, are you going to put up more money for infrastructure? Number one, because they want to move that well beyond 1.7 million barrels a day. They want to get up to 2.5, 3 million barrels a day. That's going to take pipelines. And that's also, I won't get into the technology of it, but Venezuela pumps most of their oil cold, meaning they don't put steam or other things into the ground to pull it out, like what they do, like for the oil sands. And
now, President Trump just had a meeting at the White House with all of the top U.S. oil refinery companies. And most of them came out saying, Mr. President, we are willing to commit $500 million, $1 billion, $2 billion, $2.5 billion. They are excited about this. And what they are saying is, we'll invest the capital, we'll create thousands of good paying jobs for the people of Venezuela. Then America and Venezuela will share in the oil, the security, and the money that comes from this, but it's all about control. And they're about to get into the deep dive of the brilliance of Donald Trump.
Alberta and the shale that's in North Dakota, they use a lot of heat to go down there, loosen up the oil so it can pull it up. So what the president is basically saying here is like, you know what, China, you were skimming out the back door a couple 100,000 barrels a day, and they needed it. So Trump's going to put a stop to that. So China is going to have have access to that. Move. That's the power move.
What a move.
And then never mind Iran, what's going on over there. And now he's wants to take it, but he wants to pay the people. He wants Chevron to pay the people of Venezuela. He wants to get up to 2.5, 3 million barrels a day, but he wants the people of Venezuela to be paid for it. You know why that's good? Every time we try to rebuild a country, who pays for it? We do. We gave all those contracts to Halliburton when we were rebuilding the Middle East after wars, right? Well, guess what? They came out of American taxpayers. Well, now this is, hey, we have regime change. We have some government we like. There's going to be some bumps in the road. This is all going to go there. And we want their country to get the money for their oil so they could rebuild themselves. Now, sure, there'll probably be a lot of American contractors down there who want to get paid to do it, but it'll be money that comes that way. And that is the story of Venezuelan oil.
This is what we did with Japan. This is what we should have done with Germany, but we didn't, and it turned into World War II. So getting them the money and then having private corporations fund this. Now, again, here's where we go into the brilliance of Trump.
How much of this do you think, like, I almost want to think about how much of Venezuela, of what happened with Maduro, was singular, and how much of it was a process of sequencing because of the ties Venezuela could have for America to get access back to the Panama Canal, because the Panama Canal, like if I was to write a priority, Tom, and this goes to all of you guys, question for you. You're the president, Trump administration, you're sitting there. 10 issues. Rank importance of some of these issues. Which one's more important than other? Ready? Hang on. Maduro being captured. You got Iran regime changing, okay, because of how chaotic it is. And you know how they call them the Middle East. What do they call it? There's a word for it, that they are the agency of terrorism in the Middle East. You hear a comment like that. Yeah. Sponsors of terrorism in Iran. Okay. All right. So
money and influence.
How about Panama Canal? If let's just take those three. Of those three, which one do you think is number one most important to U.S.? Panama Canal, Iran,
probably Panama,
Venezuela.
I would say the canal, because once you get the canal off of Chinese influence, so they needed the canal and they also needed the metal in Venezuela because that's how they get the oil.
Perfect. So then China's the one that stopped the Panama Canal deal with Hutchinson, right?
Right.
That's exactly when they told the guy he couldn't sell his shares.
So do you think this is their way of saying, no problem, you want to do that? We've been allowing you to come and get all this oil from the Western Hemisphere, Venezuela. Here's what we're going to do to you. Go ahead. Now what do you want to do? So is he going to use this as a leverage on the tariffs with China? Because I know they've set it up. You know, they're like, nah, we'll renegotiate the China stuff in 90 days or a year or whatever. They kind of put it off. But do you think this is one way of getting the Panama? Like if all of a sudden, because look what happened right there. Look at the date and look at what happened with the percentage increases, chances going up. It went from 30 to 40%. What caused that? Venezuela. Why does the Venezuela event increase the chance? So there's some ties there between the two. What do you think, Jeff?
I think these are all related. I think these, Trump has this image among, certainly his detractors. He's some kind of buffoon, right? They are playing strategic chess here. Everything they're doing is not, it's not like we're going to get Maduro because we want a regime change in Venezuela. They're getting Maduro because it's the most efficient use of resources, because it accomplishes 4 goals at once.
That's the first domino.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at what they're trying to do, Iran plays in this too.
I think
how do you mess with the Chinese? Well, you get them distracted over in the Middle East and having worried about, all the stuff that's taking place over there. Is Iran, which is an ally of China, are they solid enough? Are they going to be a solid Chinese ally in a couple months, maybe? And this goes back to, why did the U.S. strike the Iranian nuclear facilities? Well, yes, more than one goal was accomplished in that strike. First of all, it set back the Iranian nuclear capacity, but also showed to the Iranian people that the Iranian military is toothless. They had Israeli planes and U.S. planes loitering over the country for, weeks on end?
Yep.
And they could do they were taking out Iranian leaders. It was sending a message, and it wasn't sending a message to just the Iranian people. It says, look, these leaders aren't as powerful as you think it is. It was a message to China. Look at what we can do. Look at what we can do in Venezuela. And by the way, Venezuela is hyper strategic. And it's not just about Venezuela. Venezuela, as you said, the next step toward reasserting dominance on Panama Canal and a whole bunch of other stuff that we probably don't even know about. What I'm saying is I think the Trump administration doesn't act on simplistic impulses and irrational emotion as people have this
caricature. The media paints it out to be.
Yeah, it's not. There you can see there is definite strategic planning going on.
So let me ask you, if they're saying Western Hemisphere, right? Look, this is the Western Hemisphere, the Monroe Doctrine, right? 1800s. So Western Hemisphere. Well, then somebody could say from China, well, then why do you care about Iran? Or do they? Are they leaving it out there? It's interesting, right? When you think about it. But what are your thoughts on this story here with Venezuela?
No, I think it's a huge opportunity just for the world in general. Because I mean, there was a time where I believe Venezuela was number 4 in terms of overall GDP, and it makes me think of when the Soviet Union collapsed. That if you handle this thing correctly, then you could open up that whole country back to the world as a new market. And you have to be careful with managing it too, because I think like when the Soviet Union collapsed, we kind of mishandled it. We let the CIA, let the oligarchs take over, and then the resentment from the country to that led to Putin being in control. So I think if this is done correctly, it could be a beautiful thing. It could kind of get that communist virus out of South America, because the whole communist spread across South America started with Cuba, then it went over to Venezuela, and now it's gone over to Colombia. So they could start like extracting that kind of spirit from South America. That's a big thing too.
All right. So America is going to step on the air hose feeding oxygen to China. They are going to drop the price of oil worldwide to affect Russia. They will disrupt Iran while the people are raging and protesting and removing the terrorist regime. They will starve Cuba of money, oil, and power. All this to take down countries that have been hurting the American people, spying on us, and planning to destroy us. Now, I believe most of this Venezuelan oil will actually go towards refilling the strategic oil reserves that President Joe Biden drained in order to lower gas prices and win the 2022 election. However, President Trump understands that oil and energy are the real power now, and he just made sure the United States controls over 50% of the oil reserves, making America the superpower once again.